Chosen one, anchor your spirit to what I am about to say right now. That quiet voice in the back of your mind telling you that God is disappointed in you, silence it. Because what I am about to read over your life is the opposite of what the enemy has been rehearsing in your ear. God smiles every time he looks at you, not sometimes, not on your best days, not when you finally get it right, every single time. And the reason the truth feels so hard to receive right now is the exact reason you are here. The enemy is working overtime this week for one reason and one reason only. He knows that if you ever fully grasp how God actually sees you, not how you see yourself, not how others have labeled you, not through the lens of your worst moments, but how heaven sees you, it is over for him. His entire strategy collapses the moment you believe this. So he has been busy. I know what the last 72 hours have felt like. It has not just been hard, it has been personal. Like the wait was designed specifically for you. Like the silence from heaven was confirmation that something was wrong between you and God. Maybe you have been replaying a conversation you had earlier this week, cringing, wondering if you handled it the way a person of faith should have. Or maybe you woke up at 3:0 the morning, and the first thought that rushed in was not peace, it was a list. Every failure, every shortcoming, every prayer that still has not been answered. And lying underneath all of it was this quiet, devastating conclusion: God must be tired of me. Or perhaps it has been even quieter than that. Perhaps it has not been one big moment, just a slow accumulation of ordinary days where you have started to feel invisible, like you are doing everything you can, and heaven has gone silent, and you are starting to wonder if God even notices. And in that silence, the accuser has slipped in with his most dangerous lie yet. He is not telling you that God hates you, he is too smart for that. He is telling you something far more subtle. He is whispering that God tolerates you, that he is patient with you, yes, but not delighted by you, that his love for you is obligatory, not joyful, that the smile of God is reserved for people who have done more, fallen less, believed longer, and doubted less than you have. That is the lie. And it is a precise, surgical lie, because it leaves your theology intact while it destroys your intimacy with the Father. But I need you to hear what the scripture actually says about this moment. Zephaniah 3:17 says, "The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing." Listen to that promise. He will exult over you with loud singing. That is not a God who tolerates you. That is a God who cannot contain his joy over you. That is a God who looks at you, not the finished version of you, not the healed version of you, not the version that finally stopped struggling. He looks at you right now, in this moment, in this season, with all the questions and all the weight and all the distance you feel. And he sings. You did not find this message by accident. The algorithm did not bring you here. God did. This is a divine appointment that was placed on your path before you ever opened your eyes this morning. You are standing at the edge of a revelation that is going to rewire how you see yourself for the rest of your life. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through the exact spiritual audit that exposes every place the enemy has replaced the face of God with a counterfeit. I am going to show you the specific moments this week where you thought you were failing and heaven was actually applauding. And at the end, I am going to release a declaration over your life that seals this truth into your spirit so permanently that the next time the accuser tries to build that case against you, you will have the verdict already in your hand. Do not click away. Your future self is not asking you to stay, your future self is begging you. Because what is about to shift in the next few minutes is not just your emotions, it is your identity. It all ends today. The shame, the spiritual distance, the exhausting performance of trying to earn a smile that was already on God's face before you did a single thing to deserve it. Think back to that moment this week when you nearly convinced yourself that you had gone too far. That moment when you sat with the weight of your own humanity and you could not figure out how a holy God could look at what you were carrying and feel anything other than grief. You did not know it then, but that moment of raw honesty before God, that unpolished, unscripted, unimpressive moment, that was the moment He leaned in. Because God does not smile at your performance, He smiles at you. The heaviness you have been carrying is not the weight of His disappointment. It is the weight of a lie that is finally being broken. You are not a burden to heaven. You are not a project God regrets starting. You are not on the outer edge of His grace, hoping He does not run out before He gets to you. You are the reason He sings. And what makes that smile so sacred is that it doesn't require your perfection. It doesn't require you to have it all together. It doesn't require you to be at the end of your journey, standing on the other side of everything you've been through. God smiles at you right now in the middle of it, in the confusion, in the silence, in the season where you've prayed and haven't yet seen the answer. That smile is not conditional. That smile is not a reward. That smile is recognition, the way a father looks at a child and sees not just who they are, but who they're becoming, and loves both versions completely. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because most of us have never truly allowed that truth to settle into the deeper places. We've heard it with our minds. We've nodded at it in church. We've written it down in journals and whispered it back to ourselves on hard nights. But there is a difference between knowing something and letting it reach the wounded places inside of you that have been waiting, sometimes for decades, for exactly this word. The smile of God is not something you have to earn your way into. It is not waiting on the other side of your breakthrough. It is not held in reserve until you've proven yourself consistent enough, or faithful enough, or healed enough to deserve it. It is present. It is active. It is upon you right now, in this exact moment, with every scar still visible, and every question still unanswered, and every burden still heavy on your shoulders. God looks at you fully, completely, without flinching at any of it, and He smiles. There is something about the image of a father and a child that carries a weight no other metaphor can quite hold, because a good father doesn't wait until his child has accomplished something to feel proud of them. A good father watches his child take their first stumbling steps and smiles, not because the child walked perfectly, but because the child is trying. He watches them fall and get back up, and his heart swells not with disappointment, but with a love so deep it can barely be contained. He sees potential where others see inadequacy. He sees destiny where others see delay. He sees the finished person inside the struggling one, and he is not discouraged by the distance between the two. He is moved by the journey. That is how heaven is looking at you. Not as a project to complete, not as a disappointment to manage, but as a beloved child mid-stride. And every single step, even the ones that falter, is received with a smile that has never wavered. But here's the thing that most people don't understand, and it's the reason so many chosen ones spend years feeling abandoned when they are actually appointed. The smile of God doesn't always look the way you think it should. We've been taught, somewhere along the way, that divine favor looks like ease, that God's approval looks like open doors, smooth paths, and things falling into place. So when the road gets hard, when the doors seem to close, when the silence stretches longer than you can bear, the enemy whispers that God has turned away. And you believe it, not because it's true, but because pain has a way of distorting the evidence. Pain is one of the most sophisticated liars in existence. It doesn't announce itself as deception. It clothes itself in the language of logic. It builds a case from the rubble of your circumstances and presents it to you as undeniable proof. Look at what you've lost, it says. Look at how long you've waited. Look at how many times you believed and it didn't happen. And before you realize what has occurred, you've accepted a narrative about your life and about God's posture toward you that has no foundation in truth, only in hurt. This is one of the most dangerous things the enemy does, and he doesn't need to work very hard at it. He simply waits for the wilderness season to arrive, and then he whispers into the silence that the wilderness is your destination rather than your passage. He whispers that the closed door is a verdict rather than a redirect. He whispers that the silence of God is the absence of God. And because you are human, because you are hurting, because the evidence in the natural realm does seem to suggest that something has gone wrong, you believe it. Not because you are weak, but because you are waiting. And waiting, when it stretches beyond what we feel we can endure, can begin to feel like being forsaken. Some messages don't just inform, they activate. If something stirred deep in your spirit just now, you may be ready to receive the Chosen One's blueprint. This sacred guide reveals the 8 divine patterns behind your calling, your suffering, and your destiny. It also comes with the full audiobook, so you can absorb it during prayer, rest, or quiet moments with God. And for those called to speak His truth, you'll also receive Activating Your Prophet Mantle, a powerful bonus ebook for those carrying a prophetic assignment. The link is in the first pinned comment, but only for a limited time. Think about Job. Not the Job at the end of the story, the Job in the middle. Sitting in ash, covered in affliction, surrounded by friends who were convinced his suffering was proof of God's punishment. And yet, what the enemy didn't know, what Job's friends couldn't see, what the whole natural world was blind to, was that God had pointed to Job first. God had said, "Have you considered my servant?" The attack didn't come because God had stopped watching. The attack came because God wouldn't stop talking about him. The suffering wasn't abandonment. It was the consequence of being so deeply seen by heaven that the enemy had to respond. And if you've been under an unusual level of attack, if your life has felt like warfare that doesn't match your age or your history or anything you've done, I need you to hear this. You are not cursed. You are considered. Let that distinction break open something in you. There is a profound difference between being cursed and being considered, and the two can look frighteningly similar from the inside. When you are cursed, the forces arrayed against you are working because something has gone wrong. When you are considered, the forces arrayed against you are working because something has gone right, something so right that it has drawn the attention of a realm that would prefer your assignment never reaches its appointed completion. Job was a man whose integrity was so intact, whose communion with God was so authentic, whose life was such a testimony of faithfulness that heaven itself held him up as an example. And the enemy, unable to tolerate the sight of a human being living in that kind of wholeness, demanded the right to test it. God didn't send the suffering, but God trusted Job with it. And that trust, that divine confidence in what Job was made of, was itself a form of honor. It was heaven saying, "I know what is in this one. I know what they are built to carry. I know that what comes against them will not destroy them, because I built them for this moment, before this moment ever arrived." This is why you cannot interpret the intensity of your battle as evidence of heaven's absence. The opposite is often true. The principalities that wage war against a chosen life are not confused about who they are fighting. They know what is inside of you better than you do, because they can see it from a vantage point you cannot yet access. They have witnessed the plans written in heaven over your name. They have heard the assignments spoken into the atmosphere that belong to your generation, to your family line, to the people whose lives will one day change because yours did, and they are fighting accordingly. The warfare you are experiencing is not random, it is targeted, and targeted warfare means something specific has been identified as a threat. You are that threat. Your calling is that threat. Your willingness to keep standing, even in the middle of the fire, is that threat. And you are still here, which means you are winning something you haven't even fully understood yet. But here's where it goes deeper, and this is the part that most people carry but never name. The pain of being chosen is not just the warfare, it's the isolation, it's the loneliness that doesn't make sense on paper. You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone in your spirit, because the people around you cannot fully see what's living inside of you. There is a calling in you that doesn't fit neatly into the conversations happening in your circle. There is a depth in you that makes small talk feel like suffocation, and instead of recognizing that as the mark of a distinct assignment, most chosen ones internalize it as something being wrong with them. They spend years trying to shrink themselves into spaces they were never designed to fill, wondering why it feels like wearing a coat that was made for someone else. This is one of the most quietly devastating experiences a chosen person can endure, precisely because it looks like nothing from the outside. No one can see your loneliness when you're in a room full of people. No one can see the way your spirit reaches for something that the conversation around you cannot offer. No one can see the weariness of performing connection while something inside of you is starving for something that most of the people in your life have no language for. And because you can't explain it without sounding ungrateful or arrogant or strange, you carry it alone. You wonder what is wrong with you that you can love these people and still feel this particular ache. You wonder why the spaces that should feel like home so often feel like borrowed rooms. And the real answer is that you have not yet been introduced to the fullness of what you were made for. You are experiencing the ache of a calling that hasn't yet been fully expressed. And that ache is not a malfunction. It is a compass. The isolation of the chosen is not a design flaw. It is part of the divine architecture. God does not separate his chosen ones from the crowd out of cruelty. He does it out of intentionality. There are things that can only be developed in solitude. There are depths of character that can only be formed when the noise of other people's expectations has been removed. There are conversations with heaven that can only happen when the conversations of the world have been quieted. And so God, in his wisdom and in his love, creates seasons of separation that feel like rejection, but are actually refinement. The loneliness you've been carrying is not evidence that no one wants you. It is evidence that heaven is in the process of introducing you to yourself, the true self, the called self, the self that was formed before the world got its hands on you and tried to reshape you into something smaller and more manageable. David understood this. Before the throne, before the armies, before the psalms that would outlast every kingdom, David was alone on a hillside with sheep. No audience, no recognition, no one watching. And it was in that hiddenness that God was forming something that no palace could have produced. The character that would sustain the crown was being shaped in obscurity, and coming up in just a moment, the revelation that will reframe every season of your life where you felt overlooked. Because what happened in those hidden moments was far more significant than you were ever told. Consider the hillside for a moment. It was not glamorous. It was not the environment anyone would have chosen for the making of a king. There were no teachers of warfare preparing him for Goliath. There were no advisors shaping his policies. There were no mentors pouring wisdom into his leadership style. There was just a boy, a harp, some sheep, and the open sky. And yet, in that seeming emptiness, something irreplaceable was happening. David was learning to hear God's voice in the absence of human noise. He was learning to worship when no one was watching, which is the only kind of worship that builds something real in the soul. He was developing a tenderness toward the vulnerable, the sheep under his care that would later translate into a shepherd's heart for an entire nation. He was fighting lions and bears in the silence of the wilderness and discovering, in those unseen victories, that God was with him in ways that would become the foundation of his courage when the giant appeared. The palace could have given David a crown, but it could never have given him what the hillside gave him, Only the hidden place can produce that. What you need to understand is that God doesn't waste the wilderness. Every season where you felt forgotten was actually a season where you were being filled. The desert is not a punishment. The desert is a preparation. And the proof is Moses' 40 years in the wilderness before a single burning bush. 40 years, not 40 days, not 40 weeks. 40 years of what must have felt like complete irrelevance, complete invisibility, complete removal from the life he thought he was supposed to be living. And then, at the appointed moment, heaven spoke from fire, and everything changed. Not because Moses had changed locations, because Moses had been changed within. 40 years is an almost incomprehensible span of time when you are inside of it. And Moses was not a young man leisurely spending time in the desert before his real life began. He was a man who had known the grandeur of a palace. He was a man who had once believed he knew what his calling looked like and how it would unfold, and who had seen that belief shatter in a single moment of misguided action. He fled to the wilderness, not in triumph, but in shame. He arrived there not as a leader in training, but as a fugitive. And the years in that desert must have carried a particular weight that is hard to describe, the weight of a life that seems to have ended before it ever truly began, the weight of potential that appears to have been permanently forfeited, the weight of a God who seemed to have gone silent on the very person he had once seemed to be preparing for something significant. And yet, we now know what Moses could not have known inside those 40 years. We know that heaven was watching every single day. We know that every conversation Moses had with solitude was deepening something in him that the palace had never been able to reach. We know that the humility being formed in the wilderness was the very thing that would make him qualified to lead the most significant emancipation in human history. The burning bush was not the beginning, it was the graduation. And this is the truth that has to land before we go any further. God is not running behind on your life. He is not scrambling to catch up on the plans He made for you. The delays you've experienced are not accidents that need correcting. They are architectures that needed building. Every door that closed kept you from entering a room before you had the wisdom to occupy it. Every relationship that ended preserved you from a covenant that would have consumed you. Every moment of waiting was God saying, "Not yet," not because the blessing wasn't ready, but because you weren't yet carrying the weight-bearing capacity to hold it without it breaking you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next breaks the cycle that has kept so many chosen ones from crossing into their appointed season. Think about what it means to receive something before you are ready to carry it. A seed planted in ground that has not been properly prepared will not produce what it was designed to produce, not because the seed lacked potential, but because the environment lacked readiness. A structure built on a foundation that has not been allowed to fully set will not hold the weight of what is placed upon it, no matter how beautiful the structure itself might be. And this is not a natural principle alone, it is a spiritual one. God, in His mercy, does not withhold in order to diminish you. He withholds in order to protect both you and the very blessing He intends to give you. Because He sees not just the gift, but the impact of that gift upon you, if received before your soul has the capacity to steward it with wisdom. The blessing given too soon, without the character developed to carry it, often becomes a burden rather than a breakthrough. And God loves you too much to do that to you. So He builds the foundation first. He prepares the soil. He lets the roots go deep before He calls the tree to rise. The cycle is this. Most chosen ones know they're called, but they don't believe they're worthy. And so they operate in a perpetual tension, reaching for the promise with one hand while holding on to their shame with the other. They pray for breakthrough while secretly believing they don't deserve it. They ask for elevation while quietly agreeing with every voice that told them they were too broken, too complicated, too much. and the enemy knows this. He doesn't fight your gifts, because your gifts are already sealed. What he fights is your sense of belonging in the destiny God created for you. He doesn't come for your calling, he comes for your confidence in it. And until you understand that the worthiness was never yours to earn, that it was assigned before you drew your first breath, before you made your first mistake, before anyone ever named you or misnamed you, you will keep stepping to the edge of your breakthrough and retreating, not because God withheld it, but because some part of you believed you weren't allowed to have it. This is the wound beneath the wound. This is the agreement that operates below the surface of conscious thought, making its influence felt not as a loud voice, but as a quiet gravitational pull away from everything God has promised. It is the belief, subtle and deeply embedded, that the calling is real but somehow you are the wrong person for it, that God made a mistake when he chose you, that he surely must have meant to give this assignment to someone with fewer failures, someone with a cleaner history, someone who didn't carry the specific collection of brokenness that you carry. And so, you work harder, trying to compensate. You give more, serve more, sacrifice more, trying to accumulate enough spiritual currency to feel like you've finally earned the right to what God declared over you before time began. But here is what you must hear clearly. The enemy designed that cycle with exquisite precision, because it keeps you just active enough to look faithful while keeping you just far enough from your actual inheritance that you never fully step into it. He doesn't need you to stop believing in your calling. He just needs you to keep questioning whether you specifically are worthy of receiving it. And that single question, operating below the surface of your faith, can do more damage to your forward movement than any external opposition ever could. This brings us to the real turning point. There is a prayer most chosen ones have never prayed. Not a prayer for more, not a prayer for doors, not even a prayer for healing. It's a prayer for permission. Permission to actually receive what God has already given. Permission to stop punishing yourself for your past. Permission to stop waiting for human validation before you walk into divine assignment. The most dangerous prayer you can pray is not, "Lord, send me." It's, "Lord, let me believe I'm worthy of where you're sending me." Because the assignment was never the obstacle, the agreement was. And until you break agreement with every lie that told you that you were less, that your time had passed, that the damage was too deep, that prayer stays unanswered not because God won't, but because you haven't yet opened your hands to receive what he's been holding out. There is a moment recorded in Scripture that most people read past without fully absorbing its significance. When the prodigal son came to his senses in the far country and began his journey back toward home, he rehearsed a speech on the way. He planned what he would say to his father. He decided in advance to ask not for sonship but for servanthood, because in his own mind, in his own shame-saturated assessment of himself, he had forfeited the right to be called a son. And this is the part that needs to be underlined and returned to again and again. His father did not wait at the door to hear the speech. His father saw him while he was still a great way off and ran to him, ran. The father did not wait for the explanation. He did not require the rehearsed apology. He did not need the son to prove his contrition or demonstrate his changed behavior before he released the robe and the ring and the celebration. The son returned to a welcome that his own internal narrative had told him he did not deserve. And the only thing standing between the son and the fullness of that welcome was the son's own agreement with the lie that said he had become less than a son. God is running toward you right now with everything he promised. The only question is whether you will release the servant speech before you let yourself be fully embraced. And here's the part you probably didn't expect. The thing that's been blocking you isn't your past, and it isn't your pain, and it isn't the enemy, and it isn't even unbelief in the traditional sense. It's grief, unprocessed grief. Grief over who you were supposed to be before life interrupted. Grief over the version of yourself you lost in the hard seasons. Grief over the relationships that should have stayed, the opportunities that should have opened, the childhood that should have been different, the years that feel like they were stolen. And grief, when it goes unnamed, disguises itself as spiritual stagnation. It looks like heaviness. It looks like disconnection from God. It looks like a wall in your prayer life that you can't seem to break through. But it's not a spiritual deficiency. It's a wound that has never been brought before the throne and released. And God is not asking you to pretend it didn't hurt. He's asking you to bring the hurt to Him and let Him do what only He can do. Redeem what was broken, restore what was taken, and resurrect what you thought was dead. Grief is one of the most spiritual experiences a human being can carry, and yet it is one of the least acknowledged in the spaces where faith is practiced. We have built entire communities around celebrating the promises of God while quietly shaming the people who are still sitting with the losses. We tell people to have faith without giving them space to first feel the weight of what faith has been asked to carry. We tell them to trust the process without acknowledging that some of what has happened in that process was genuinely devastating, and so the grief gets pushed underground. It gets covered with declarations and buried under activity and denied in the name of positivity. But it does not disappear. It simply migrates into the body, into the nervous system, into the quiet places of the soul, where prayer is supposed to flow freely, but now feels blocked by something you cannot quite name. And the reason you cannot name it is that no one gave you permission to grieve what was lost. No one sat with you in the ash and acknowledged that what happened to you was real, and that it hurt, and that the hurt was valid. But I want to give you that permission right now. What you lost was real. The version of yourself that was altered by those experiences deserved better. The dreams that went unmet, the love that was withdrawn, the safety that was taken, the years that slipped away in seasons of struggle, all of it deserves to be mourned. And until it is brought honestly before God and released in His presence, it will continue to quietly block the very flow of life and calling and freedom that is trying to move through you. Because here is the final thing, the thing that changes everything. God smiles every time He looks at you, not because of what you've done, but because of what He placed in you before the world ever had a chance to touch it. That original design, that initial seed of purpose, that divine imprint. It has never been damaged. It has never been stolen. It has never been revoked. People may have tried. Circumstances may have pressed hard against it. Religion may have buried it under rules and shame. But the image of God in you is indestructible. And every time heaven looks down at what's still alive inside of you, despite everything that tried to kill it, God smiles. Not with pity, not with sorrow, with pride, with joy, with the full weight of a creator who sees his greatest work still standing. There is something that does not die in the chosen, no matter what comes against them. Something that bends but does not break. Something that goes quiet in the hard seasons but never fully goes silent. It is the original light that was placed in you before your name was known on this earth, before your parents held you, before any human voice ever spoke over you with either blessing or curse. It is the part of you that was formed in the secret place and sealed with purpose before you took your first breath. And no amount of trauma can erase it. No amount of failure can disqualify it. No amount of time lost in the wilderness can age it or diminish it or cause it to expire. That seed of divine intention in you is still alive, still whole, still waiting for the moment when you finally stop running from it and turn toward it with everything you have. And when you do, when you finally stop agreeing with every voice that said it was gone, when you finally lift your eyes and let the full gaze of heaven reach you without deflecting it, you will find that God has been smiling at exactly this moment for longer than you can comprehend, waiting for you to see what He has never stopped seeing. So, before you move from this moment, place your hand on your heart and declare this with me. Speak it slowly. Mean every word. I release the grief I've been carrying in silence. I release the shame that was never mine to own. I release every label placed on me by people who could not see what heaven sees. I break agreement with every lie that told me I was too late, too broken, too much, or not enough. I receive the love of God that was never contingent on my performance. I receive the calling that was sealed before my birth and remains sealed regardless of my failures. I receive the worthiness that was assigned to me before I ever drew breath. I step forward into the season God has prepared, not striving, not earning, but trusting. I am seen, I am held, I am smiled upon, and I walk into everything God promised, knowing that what He started in me, He will complete. I am not behind. I am not forgotten. I am exactly where transformation begins. Let those words settle. Let them reach the places in you that have been waiting for exactly this kind of declaration. Because there is a power in spoken agreement with truth that disrupts every agreement you have ever made with the lies that tried to define your life. When you speak the truth about who you are and whose you are not simply reciting words. You are realigning your spirit with the reality that heaven has always known about you. You are stepping out of the false narrative and into the true one. You are placing your feet on ground that was always yours to stand on, even in the seasons when you were told it wasn't. And the God who has been watching every single moment of your journey, every stumble, every tear, every silent prayer in the dark, every act of faithfulness that no human eye ever witnessed, that God is not disappointed in what He sees. He is moved by it. He is proud of it. He is smiling at it with the full warmth of a love that has never once wavered. Not in your hardest moment, not in your most broken season, not in any moment when you felt most certain that He had looked away. If this message confirmed something your spirit already knew, you are not here by accident. Share it with someone who needs to remember that God has not turned away. And take a moment right now to leave a word in the comments. Tell me where you are in your journey, because this community is not a comment section. It is a gathering of chosen ones who are still standing, still believing, and still being smiled upon by God.